you automatically tend to poo 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 on a product if it's got a big name endorsing it. And let's face it, guys, there aren't too many fishing personalities bigger than that of the Googan Squad. Gentlemen, ladies, and anyone in between, I welcome you all to yet another installment where I stand cojones deep, repeatedly cast into what looks to be promising structure, catch nothing at all whatsoever, and talk about the fishing line that I'm using. And in today's episode, we'll be talking about the latest Googan Squad endorsed, Googan Squad branded fishing line, their Googan Braid. And this, my friends, is their 30-pound. It comes in a relatively familiar, we'll call it moss green. And initial impressions are pretty good. I've had about, I don't know, 20 hours of actual casting retrieving time put on this specific spool of line. And I can't say anything bad about it. I was pleasantly surprised when I saw that it was a Japanese manufactured product, not a Chinese manufactured product, which so many are today. Not saying that the Chinese braids are horrible or bad or indifferent, but it seems that the weavers in Japan know how to make a good braided fishing line. And this stuff here, if you're familiar with J-braid, you will like this stuff. If you like J-braid, it has a very similar, I'd say, feel to it. The coloration, the dye that they use to pigment the line, it doesn't have a waxy residue at all whatsoever to speak of. It doesn't hold much water either. So a lot of lines that use a waxy coating shed water. So if you're swinging a current or just tipped down, and you know, a lot of the belly of the line's in the water, you'll be reeling up a couple milliliters of water per cast. While no braid is perfect and no line's perfect, there are some that do that better than others. The last thing you want to do is be bringing in tons of water. It makes it difficult to manage your line and keep it off the water, which impacts sensitivity and casting performance, all that kind of good jazz. And I gotta say, this stuff's pretty good. It was one of those things where you automatically tend to poo-poo on a product if it's got a big name endorsing it. And let's face it, guys, there aren't too many fishing personalities bigger than that of the Googan Squad. You know, they get the most views on YouTube. They have a huge army of followers that will seemingly buy everything that has their name on it, which is fine. That's absolutely fine, as long as they're priced accordingly. They're not trying to overinflate because of the name, you know, the price of the product, which this is priced at the premium level. It doesn't seem to look like they're coming out with any big spool. So, you know, I think it's about 20 bucks for 150 yards, which is up there. And right now, in terms of 8-strand braids that are super smooth and silky coming through the guides, they're super quiet, which this stuff is, the mainstream line to beat, in my opinion, has got to be Power Pro Super Slick version 2. Not a Power Pro fanboy. I wasn't a big fan of Super Slick. There's a time and a place for original Power Pro 4-strand, and I'm well aware 10 years ago, 15 years ago, that they had some issues with manufacturing where you get little blobs in the braid or weld spots. So I'm not saying that, or not trying to stick up for a name brand product that's been around for a while, but that Super Slick V2, especially in the black onyx, that onyx for whatever reason seems to stay like new the longest in my experiences. And I've used their moonshine, I've used their blue, I haven't used the green, but that onyx, it stays shiny. See how it has the sheen on the line? Again, this is after about 20 hours of use, you know, a couple thousand casts maybe. Still nice and shiny. The onyx has held up that way for a season and a half, and it's been one of my go-to lines. So we're throwing a jig, we're making about, I don't know, 120 foot casts. Got a Bantam MGL 150 set to 3 pins on, and I think it's set to 4 on the dial, just for carefree, easy casting. I'm not looking to break any casting distance records, and it handles wonderfully. And without me talking, take a listen. I'll turn the gain up on the mic so you can hear a little more accurately what I'm hearing in terms of what the line sounds like coming through the guides of the rod and through the level wind. I'll shut up now. Super quiet. And being somebody who's used miles of the original J-Braid, that stuff was groundbreaking in terms of its price and affordability, its availability. It's, you know, you can get metered braid in 500-yard spools, or you used to be able to. I don't know why they discontinued that. Now you can only get it in bulk spools and 300-yard spools. But it was a spectacular line. I went through miles of it, and it never had an issue. But being me and moving from braid to braid, a little bluegill or rock bass grabbing the trailer, moving from braid to braid just to see for you guys what's out there and if it's up to snuff. You know, I haven't really gone back to J-Braid, which I'll tell you what, it's still a very viable line. And truth be told, in my personal experiences with their new J-Braid Grand, I don't like it. I will no longer use it. I've had phantom break-offs, mystery break-offs, random chafing where there shouldn't be, fishing structure that I've fished 100 times before, and it just left me with a sour taste in my mouth, and I don't have any confidence in that line. I haven't had any issues with the 40-pound, but anything under 40-pound down to the 6-pound, which I was really, really hoping to enjoy the 6-pound, because not many manufacturers out there make a super thin braided line. I just can't go back to that J-Braid Grand. I can't do it. So I have to find other replacements for the lighter stuff. And in general, there's so many good braids out there right now. It's not a knock against Daiwa. It's just that I don't find their Grand to be all that great of a fishing line. For me. Maybe you guys have had different experiences, but so with that being said, I'm not trying to pick one brand and say that they're guaranteed to make a good product. Like I mentioned about the Power Pro Super Slick V2, I did not like the version 1 of the Super Slick, and the Power Pro original did have issues, even though it's the best-selling braid on the planet. And I'm fishing some Chinese braids at Hercules H strand in 30-pound. That's a remarkably good braid for the price of entry. I think it's like 20 bucks for 500 yards, something like that. That's ridiculously cheap. And that stuff, very reminiscent of, yet again, J-Braid. So J-Braid's my benchmark, and it's probably for the guys out there that have used it, theirs as well. You measure everything up against it because, you know, look at the price, 300 yards, 20 bucks on Amazon, that kind of deal. And putting this stuff against a standard, a staple, it's its equal. And in some cases, it kind of feels a little slicker. I do like this stuff. So it's tough to tell after only, you know, a handful of outings and 20 hours of repetitive casting. This is how I roll. I mean, if I'm in a river, if I'm in a kayak, if I'm in a boat, I'm non-stop casting. I'm a power fisherman. I don't like really super slow finesse step, you know, presentations. I like working, you know, high priority spots, high probability spots, and, you know, long range target acquisition is always fun. You pick a target like that branch over there and let it rip and see if you can get it as close as possible, that kind of deal. So when it comes to a braided fishing line, I like consistent performance, and this is definitely offered that in spades. I can't at this point find any real negatives. There is a snapping turtle in front of me, and I'm in cojones deep water amongst a weed field, so hopefully there's none sneaking up behind me or up my shorts, because that'd suck. But it's one of those things that if you're looking for a braid, that's pretty good. No negatives that I to speak of so far. No phantom break-offs. I've caught about 10 fish in the 3 to 4 pound class. I wasn't filming, so I don't have any footage of that like I sometimes do. I'm not a big, you know, on the water filming guy. But I like this stuff. Now, what I find interesting is the Googan Squad, they're bass fishermen. That's where they hang their hat. I've seen some footage and some videos of them fishing down in Florida, and I think Peric high spotted a reel on a tar pit, and it was blaming the reels being broken and jamming up when you can see the big pile of line that's binding up when he's trying to turn the handle. So they've progressed, they've learned, but they're bass guys. The reason why I bring that up is I'm fishing grass that's all in one direction due to the river obviously pushing it into a grain, and I'm throwing a swim jig and I'm coming across it and it's easily just coming up and over it. Now if you're fishing in a lake with no current, especially in the summer when the waters are usually lower, you'll have the grass come up and it's kind of curl over at the surface, so you don't necessarily have a true grain structure. That's kind of where you have to worry about, you know, grass clumping up on the line. So as a group of bass fishermen, it's interesting to see that they don't offer a more abrasive, coarser 4-strand or 5-strand like Berkley's new 5-strand, which is incredible line. If you're fishing grass, that 5-strand Berkley is, I can't find one better, to be quite honest with you. And I would like to see, I'm going to trademark this before the Googan Squad does, a braided line called serrated braid. A good 4 carrier, good 5 carrier, tightly woven like a Max Quattro or like the Berkley X5, that when you come up on a pile of vegetation that's on your line, you just give it a pop, it just shreds clean like a serrated edge would cut through a rope versus a straight edge, and do so with less effort. So for bass guys to come out with only an 8-strand smooth line, I find it interesting. Very interesting. Not knocking them, just things that I think about when I'm looking at a product from a marketing standpoint and a usability standpoint, where yeah, you can Carolina rig with this stuff, no problem, but you're going to have a little bit more difficulty freeing yourself up from that wad of grass if you're frogging. I mean, you don't want to have that bass come up in the edge of the pads and get down in the weeds and not be able to at least try to shred some of it off under tension when you're fighting that fish. And 8-strand braids tend to not do it as well. And I have 25 years of experience fishing topwater frogs, that kind of stuff. So I know the kind of line I want for that purpose specifically, and it's not a super slick smooth braid. And people talk about dig-ins and such. I don't necessarily have any issues with dig-ins with 4-strand braids versus 8-strand braids. Just gotta make sure you spool up super tight, so the only loose coils you're winding on are that of the line you're casting and retrieving. So with that being said, I have to pick up the phone. My friend's calling me about a Saragossa because I got the brand spanking new one in today, and hope you guys enjoy this. Tight lines, and I'll see you soon.